Oh, my name is Toni Cannelli. I'm a teacher in England. I teach the drums. That's my subject. What I'd like to do today is just talk about my experience of like being a teacher, because when I first started playing the drums as a little kid, obviously the last thing on my mind was to be a teacher. I just played because I loved to play. Um, and I think what I'm going to do today is I'll just try and break down into six categories, the areas that I've learned about and I'm still learning about now, which I think helps to become a better teacher. So the first category is going to be teach from experience. I think I did my first gig when I was about 10. That was at the Royal Albert Hall in London, playing in a marching band. And basically I played in loads of little sort of pubs and stuff like that, playing the drum kit, playing music and just having fun and all that kind of business, which is all experience. And I eventually sat down with a really great drum teacher called Bob Armstrong. Bob Armstrong. And Bob was a player who just so happened to teach. So he was like a player coach. And I learned so much from Bob because it was all real valuable stuff, because he could walk the talk. What he was actually teaching, he was actually doing, and it was for real, so it had a massive impact on me. So from that point onwards, I've learned from Bob. Then I became a professional drummer around about the age of 17, 18, and I was out on the road going around the world, getting all kinds of experience, which was like absolutely great. And I was playing in orchestras, learning to read music, learning to play arrangements. I was gaining valuable experience. And again, I wouldn't have dreamed of going into teaching if I hadn't got this experience. You can't just learn a subject from a book and parrot fashion teach it to somebody. I remember when I was at school, some of the teachers that I warmed to were teachers that actually were actively doing what they were teaching. They weren't just reciting facts in a kind of a boring way. So the first thing what I would recommend for anyone who wants to be a teacher is that firstly, get some experience. That's really, really important. Before, learn to walk the talk before you even attempt to teach. Right, so let's go. I personally think that this next subject is helping the student how to think, not what to think. A good teacher shows a student where to look, but it doesn't show them what to see. So I've learned, it's been a learning curve for me. When I first started to teach the drums, people used to just sit down and say, "How do you do that? How do you do that? Show me this, show me that." So I was okay with that kind of teaching, because they wanted to know. And then it all pretty much came to a head when someone came to a lesson and said they'd been to a concert and they'd seen a really great band, and the guy and this student said, "And you taught the drummer?" So I said, "What was his name?" And he said, "Well, I don't know." I said, "Well, hang on, how do you know I taught him if you didn't speak to him?" And he said, "Oh," he said, he sounded just like you." That to me was like a wake up point. I realized I was teaching wrong. It's not about me, it's about developing the student. It's about, I don't want to just sit down and show people what I do, and I don't want to teach people what I'm interested in. So if I'm interested in Motown music, and I get a kid come to a lesson and he's got like pins through his nose and he's got green hair, how insulting just to say, right, we're going to learn about Motown music now, just because I'm interested in it. Or I start to take him through books that just because I'm interested in the book, you assume that the student's interested in the book. Something I've learned, learn to sort of walk in someone else's shoes for a few miles and then try and reevaluate what you're doing. So teaching is not just an ego driven, oh, I do it this way and you're going to do it that way. You have to have an open mind, and you have to uh, keep constantly thinking about what you're putting across. I remember one kid brought a lesson to a lesson, a book called Stick Control, which is like a mandatory thing in the drum fraternity. But personally, um, I've never really warmed to it. It reminds me of like being at school. Being at school was just like sitting in a lesson, being told what to remember by a teacher, not having an opinion on anything, and then sitting in the sports hall doing an exam trying to remember what you've been taught. I don't know. To me, there's no. I'm not in that equation. It's like, what's my opinion? Do I disagree with what I'm being taught? So, I think that one of the great things that I remember from like being at school is I used to sit next to a very highly intelligent kid whose dad was an astrophysicist, believe it or not. And we were having a lesson at school about the Christmas story, and the teacher was talking about the three wise men following the star. And this kid put his hand up and said, "Sir, what star?" And the teacher said, "Well, it's a star of Bethlehem." And then the student said, "Well, I've never heard of that. What are you talking about?" Me and my dad, we've got a telescope. We look at the night sky every night. I've never seen the star of Bethlehem. Which one's that? And he said, well, it was a comet. And the kid said, "Well, no, I know the cycles of the comets. It wasn't a comet. Wrong period. No, that's wrong." And the teacher says, "Look, it was the Christmas star." And the student said, "I'm going to get my dad to come have a word with you because you're just teaching us a load of nonsense." Now, for me, that was a big wake-up call because as a kid, you just sit and get taught things and you don't question anything. And I think that you need to question everything if you're going to be good at anything. And you're never going to come up with the ultimate way of doing anything. There's always room for improvement. So, I like that philosophy. The minute you believe that something is real or something is true, your stupidity kicks in because you stop learning, you stop developing. So, as a teacher, having an open mind and trying to show kids how to think, not what to think, is like the ultimate goal for me. Being judgmental means that, firstly, when I first started to teach, if I can say to somebody, "I can see your point of view." See your point of view? How can you see a point of view? What that means is I've got like a bias towards vision. So I learn from vision, uh, but other people learn auditory. They learn by ears. It's the most important thing to them. And some people learn by emotion. So when you're teaching, it's kind of like you must not judge a person to be thinking the same way as you. So what I tend to do when I'm teaching, because I teach the drums, I get them to look in the mirror in case they're visual. I record them in case they're auditory. I get them to work on their breathing in case they're kinesthetic. They're emotionally based people. Also, as a teacher, I've had the pleasure of like teaching in schools, doing classroom stuff, not just one-to-one lessons. And I remember I was invited to do some talks on drumming at one school, and I was doing 3 days in a line. And this was like a workshop to a class. And these kids were only about 10 or 11 years old. And on the first day, there was just one kid who just wouldn't sit still. He just kept running around, he wouldn't sit down. And, I just kind of like thought, okay, he'll be okay tomorrow. The following day, he was worse. We couldn't control him. And eventually, he just run round the classroom, banged into a cupboard, and things fell off the cupboard. And I said, "Look, you're just going to have to go outside. Just go outside and just think about your behaviour." So when he went outside, everyone in the class was saying, "Look, don't allow him to do tomorrow because he's just making our life hell." So eventually, at the end of the lesson, I said to the kid, "I'm afraid you won't be able to do tomorrow's lesson. We'll put you in another class and you can do extra English or whatever it is." So as he walked off, this girl came up to me, a part of the class, and she said, "You do realise that his mum and dad both died of cancer when they were young, and he lives with his grandma, who's a junkie." Now, I couldn't believe that. I just felt I'd been so judgmental, I couldn't understand his behaviour, and I just saw him as a bit of a pain like everybody else. But you must look into things. You can't just judge on a surface sort of thing. Look into what's going off. Also, I remember doing another classroom lesson with a kid who was severely autistic, and basically he would just sit there, not say a word. He never spoke ever, and sometimes he would get his rubber practice pad out and play the snare drum rudiments. Sometimes he wouldn't. So I got a class of 25 kids, and sometimes he'd just sit there and I say, "You're going to get your sticks out?" And he'd go, "No." And that was it. So what I did is I eventually, he had a couple of lessons where he just refused to take the drumsticks out. So I rang his mum up and I said, "Look, I'm not too sure that he should be in the group. I don't think he's warming to it." And his mum said, "Oh no, don't." She said, "All he ever talks about is drumming and you." It's like, what? She said, "He loves you as a teacher and he loves drumming, but he just can't show any emotions." So again, it's kind of like, wow, I'm learning about teaching, and I can't generalize. So please, when you're teaching, do not generalize. Right, next subject. Next thing is like, keep learning yourself. You can't be a proactive teacher if you're not actually learning about your subject. For me, as a musician, as a drummer, I know that it's about 90 million recorded songs. If you play them back to back, that's 600 years it takes to listen to all that stuff. And just learning arrangements for me, I try and learn 6 new songs a week. I'm learning all the time. I had a guy come to a lesson a while ago. It was from Brazil. And he said, "Show me how to play a samba." And I was like, "Whoa, me show you how to play a samba." So I kind of like looked into developing the feel of a samba more. And this is what makes it so interesting as a teacher, is the fact that you should be, it's a great expression. Life is our teacher, and we should be in a constant state of learning. So by constantly